I'm going to say something that might not sound empowering at first. Sometimes the hardest phase of growth doesn't look like progress at all. It looks like confusion, isolation, and questioning every decision you've ever made. There were moments where I genuinely wondered if something was wrong with me, not because my life had fallen apart, but because something inside me felt like it no longer fit the life I was living. And when that feeling stays with you long enough, you start asking yourself a very uncomfortable question. Am I lost, or am I changing? There have been moments in the last few years where I genuinely didn't recognise myself, not physically, but internally. I looked at certain choices I had made, situations I had tolerated, and versions of myself I had performed, and I thought, how did I become this version? And that question isn't dramatic, it's sobering. Because no one wakes up one day, decides to slowly shrink. It happens quietly. You adapt and you compromise. You tell yourself it's temporary. You convince yourself you're being patient, understanding, and strong until one day you realise you're emotionally exhausted. I've had seasons where I was functioning perfectly on the outside, working, smiling, posting, showing up, and internally I felt disconnected from myself. That's a strange place to be, because nothing is technically wrong, but nothing feels fully right either. And that in-between phase is uncomfortable because you can't blame anyone else for it. It's also the phase where your mind becomes incredibly noisy. You question everything. Which direction should I go? What am I actually meant to do? Have I wasted time? Am I starting too late? Some days your mind feels like a room full of different voices, all arguing about what the right path is. And the hardest part is realising no one else can answer that question for you. It forces you to look at yourself, your patterns, your standards, and your silence. There's a version of you that exists in survival mode, that keeps the peace and doesn't want to be too much. The version that over-explains so nobody misunderstands you, and the version that accepts less than you deserve because you tell yourself it's better than nothing. I've been that person, and I wasn't weak, I was coping, but coping is not the same as aligned, and at some point you feel the shift. It's subtle. You start getting irritated by things you used to excuse. You start questioning things you once defended. You start feeling restless in spaces that used to feel familiar. That restlessness, it's not instability, it's awareness. And awareness can be very lonely. Because the moment you start seeing things differently, the world around you doesn't automatically change with you. You're still surrounded by the same people, the same routines, the same expectations, but internally something has shifted, and suddenly you feel like you're standing in the same room, but experiencing it from a completely different place. And awareness is uncomfortable because once you see the truth, you have a choice. You either shrink back down to stay comfortable, or you expand and risk being misunderstood. I remember the first time I felt that shift. I was sitting alone in my room thinking about decisions I'd made, and it hit me. I couldn't keep living in compromise. It was scary, but I also felt alive in a way I hadn't in years. I think a lot of people confuse this phase with being lost. You're not lost. You're confronting yourself, and that's harder than chasing a goal. Confronting yourself means sitting with uncomfortable truths, realizing that some of the things you tolerated you shouldn't have, realizing that some of the paths you followed weren't really yours. And that kind of honesty can shake your confidence for a while, because when the old version of you starts dissolving, the new version hasn't fully formed yet. And that space in between can feel incredibly uncertain and confusing. There were moments where I realised I wasn't building a life that reflected my standards anymore, and that's hard to admit, because it means accepting responsibility. It means saying, I allowed this. Not because you're weak, but because you were operating from an older version of yourself. Growth doesn't always look like adding more. Sometimes it's removing what you settled for, and removing is painful. You lose dynamics, you lose comfort and the version of you that kept things smooth. But you gain self-respect, and self-respect changes everything. What people rarely talk about is how quiet that transformation is. It doesn't look dramatic from the outside. You're not announcing it or posting about it. You're simply making small internal decisions that no one else can see. And those quiet decisions slowly reshape who you are. There's a loneliness that comes with raising your standards. People don't always like it. When you stop explaining, when you stop tolerating, and when you stop chasing, they feel it. Sometimes I'll call it ego, attitude, or distance, but sometimes it's just growth. The hardest part of becoming is that no one claps for it. No one sees the nights you sat with yourself questioning everything. They don't see the internal battles and the restraints. They just see the new boundary and assume it came out of nowhere. It didn't. It came from exhaustion and self-reflection. There's a moment in evolution where you realise you can't go back, even if it would be easier and less lonely. You physically can't shrink yourself back into who you were. That's not arrogance, that's expansion. And expansion feels uncomfortable because it feels empowering. There were times I doubted myself, where my own mind tried to convince me that I was overthinking everything, that maybe I should just settle down, stop analysing life so much and accept things as they are. But deep down I knew that feeling wouldn't go away, because once your awareness expands, pretending not to see things becomes impossible. But here's what I've learned. When something feels consistently misaligned, your body knows before your mind catches up. You can distract yourself, you can rationalize it, you can even try to minimize it, but it lingers. And that lingering feeling, that's becoming. Becoming is messy. It's not a straight path where everything suddenly makes sense. It's a process of shedding identities you once believed defined you. And every time you shed one of those layers, you temporarily feel like you don't fully recognize yourself anymore. But that doesn't mean you're lost. It means you're evolving. It's the death of the old identity, and death, even metaphorical, is uncomfortable. You grieve who you were, even if that version of you tolerated less than you deserved, because you were familiar, you felt safe, you weren't fully expressed. Becoming is not glamorous. It's not a rebrand or a glow-up montage. It's quiet decisions. It's saying no without explaining. It's walking away without performing strength. It's rebuilding without announcing it, and you will question yourself during it. That's normal. Strength doesn't mean certainty all the time. Strength sometimes means choosing alignment even when it costs you your comfort. I remember nights sitting in silence, questioning whether I was making the right choices, then realising that discomfort wasn't the enemy, it was the signal. If you feel like you're in that strange middle space right now, that space can feel incredibly isolating, because it often feels like everyone else around you has their life figured out while you're standing still trying to understand yourself. But what people don't realise is that the most meaningful transformations in life often happen in silence. They happen in moments when no one else is watching, when you're alone with your thoughts, slowly choosing who you want to become, where you've outgrown parts of your old life but the new one hasn't fully formed yet. So know this, you're not behind and you're not confused, you're recalibrating, and recalibration requires stillness. It requires honesty and admitting that some of the things you once prayed for no longer fit. That's not failure, that's evolution. Identity isn't fixed, it's layered. And sometimes you have to shed a layer that no longer reflects your standards. And that doesn't make you unstable, it makes you self-aware. You're allowed to change your mind, to want better, to raise your standards without apologizing for it. You're allowed to evolve beyond what people are comfortable with. That doesn't make you lost, it makes you in progress. And progress isn't loud, it's disciplined and self-aware. It's sometimes lonely, but it's powerful. So if you're in that in-between space where you don't fully recognize yourself anymore, but you know you can't go back, good. That means you're becoming, and becoming requires courage, not performance, not perfection, courage, and that's enough. Thank you for staying and listening. If this conversation resonated with you, you might also want to watch the next video. I did everything right, so why am I still here? If you'd like to support this space, you can like, comment and subscribe. It genuinely helps reach other people who might be sitting with the same questions. If you enjoy my content and would like to support the channel, you can leave a little tip via the PayPal link in the description. And if you want to be here for the next conversation, you can turn on notifications. Your support doesn't just help the channel grow, it reminds me that I'm not the only one thinking about these things quietly, and that matters more than you know. Sending you all so much love. Until next time, keep becoming.